All right, and we want to say greetings to everyone and thank you all for being here today. We're grateful to the Lord to be able to come before you and share with you the things that the Lord has laid on our hearts to share. All right, so if you have your Bibles, let's go to the 10th chapter of the book of Luke. We're going to continue to talk about what we started talking about last week. Concerning the fear of the Lord. So the 10th chapter of the book of Luke. All right, we're going to start reading at verse 1. It says, after these things the Lord appointed other 70 also. Everybody see that? Mm-hmm. Who appointed them? You see. And sent them 2 and 2 before his face into every city and place whither he himself would come. Now, it still happens that way. The Lord sends people, and then his power shows up. That's how he show up. You see that. Now back then, what he was doing, he was going, and he was sending people, sending his ministers before him, and then he would come there physically himself. They were there to prepare the place for him. And so spiritually, that's what takes place today, is that God sends his ministers to prepare the place for him. You see that still. It's just now he's in spirit form. He doesn't have a natural body the way that we have it, or the way that he had it when he was in this world. You see that. All right. So verse 2, it says, therefore said he unto them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. Go your ways, behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. Carry neither purse, nor scrip, nor shoes, and salute no man by the way. And into whatsoever house ye enter, first say, peace be to this house. And if the Son of Peace be there, your peace shall rest upon it. If not, it shall turn to you again. And in the same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his hire. Go not from house to house. And into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you, eat such things as are set before you. Everybody see that? Mm-hmm. So look at what he says. And into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you. Everybody see that? Verse 9, and heal the sick that are therein, and say unto them, the kingdom of God has come nigh unto you. So, who is that for? What sick are going to be healed? Those that receive them. You see? Notice he didn't say those that receive me. In other words, himself. Whoever believe in me as Jesus Christ, then you can heal them. He said whoever receive you, the one that I've sent. Everybody see that? Okay. Verse 10, but into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you not. Everybody see that? Mm-hmm. It's important that you see that now when you're talking about the fear of God. It's impossible for you to fear God and not fear the one that he sent, the messengers that he sent. You ought to have some kind of reverence for him. You see that? Now that's the reason why I'm, ministers have to be very careful about who they're around all the time and things like that. You can become too common for people. With people, they can think that they can just joke around and play with you, and they'll, we'll go over that in a little bit, but they'll cross a line. You see that? We'll go over that. All right. So verse 10, but into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you not, go your ways out into the streets of the same, and say, even the very dust of your city, which cleaveth on us, we do wipe off against you. Notwithstanding, be ye sure of this, that the kingdom of God is come nigh unto you. But I say unto you that it shall be more tolerable in that day for Sodom than for that city. What city? That didn't receive them. The city that did not receive them. The people in that city, in other words, that didn't receive, not God, didn't receive his servants. Now I'm trying to get you to see it's one and the same. It's one and the same. It's impossible for people to say, well, I believe in God, I believe God, and then reject the ones that God sent to preach his word. God ain't coming, God is not preaching any more messages. He preached his last message to his disciples before he went back to heaven. You see that? On the mountain there, when he was received up in the glory, that was the last message he ever preached. Everybody understand? Now, by his Holy Spirit, he preaches through his ministers. Now, this is the reason why the devil has done such a good job of putting so many false ministers out there. It makes people lose respect for God's real ministers. If you know, it loses its value. I was watching something like a documentary. I think it was. It might have been. I can't remember now what it was, but the woman was talking about in the Middle Ages. It was how common gold was, and you know, and then the king had came and he was eating his food out of this other material, and everybody wanted that material, but it was so rare, and so that made it expensive. You had to be very rich to have this material. And then she said, and then somebody come along and figured out how to make the material. So then it was in abundance. And because it was in abundance, it became less expensive. That material was tin. So if you can imagine, there was a time when tin was more expensive than gold. So you have to ask yourself, what is it that makes something worth so much? It's the rarity of it. My wife and I, we went to the Titanic Museum, and we were walking on this floor, and they were talking about how expensive the flooring was, and this floor was in the Titanic itself, and they were talking about how much it cost to lay that floor down. And then the guy, as he was doing the presentation, he said, "Now this is linoleum." He said, but back then, in the days of the Titanic, it was rare, so it was very expensive. Now you can go to the store around the corner and get it. You see that? And so because when it's rare, that's what makes it expensive. The harder it is to get to, and the least amount that it is in this world, that's what makes it expensive. You see that? That's what makes it so expensive. Rolls Royce, they started around $200,000 starting price. And anybody here ever seen a Rolls Royce dealership? You know why you don't see them? Because you have to order them. They make them when you order and pay for them. You're not gonna go and pay notes on that. You see that? You're gonna have the money to pay outright for it, and then you have to wait on them to make it for you. You see that? And so the rarity of something is what makes it expensive and what makes it precious. If you remember, even in the Bible, now we're getting to something now. In the Bible, what do you see sometimes, especially in the Old Testament? That the word of the Lord was what? Precious in those days. Why? Because it was rare. In the days of Samuel, the word of the Lord was precious. Why? Because God wasn't hardly speaking. And so whenever God says something, people really listened and they took heed to it. Now you got to preach on every corner. Now let me make this clear. The word of the Lord has always been precious. But the devil have flooded you with false doctrine and with false preachers, and so if you're not careful, it can all look the same. You see that? It can all look the same, and that's so you done spent half of your life talking about false preachers, and then when you run into a real one, you don't know that you're coming against the Lord, and it makes you lose respect. You see that? When you don't have respect for just the office itself, you don't have respect for God either. You see. All right, let's go and keep reading. Verse 13, woe unto thee, Chorazin, woe unto thee, Bethsaida, for if the mighty works had been done in Tyre and Sidon, which have been done in you, they had a great while ago repented, sitting in sackcloth and ashes. But it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the judgment than for you. And thou, Capernaum, which are exalted to heaven, shall be thrust down to hell. He that heareth me, heareth you, heareth who? Me. See, one and the same. And he that despiseth you, despiseth what? Me. One and the same. Now that word despise, that's a broad word there. It didn't say how you despise him. Just despise him. I don't like the way Brother Bolden dressed. Why don't he brush his hair sometime before he come out? Just any little thing you can just despise, and you doing the same thing to God. You see that? Now that's the order. It's a tall order to preach for the Lord. When I first started preaching, the Lord brought me to the book of Ezekiel, and even before then, brought me to the book of Ezekiel, and he showed me what my calling was. He was showing me that in this book, in the book of Ezekiel, that when he sends prophets, their job is to warn people. And if they don't warn the people, then that person that they're supposed to warn will die in their sins and go to hell. But the prophet that didn't warn them, he'll be in the same trouble. He'll have to answer for God for that. You see that? But he said, now if you warn him and he don't turn, then his blood is on his hands. But if you don't warn him, the blood is on yours. You're responsible for that person. To me, that's a tall order. Because I didn't ask, that was my thought. Well, I didn't ask for that. And so, it ain't just preachers getting up, preaching a feel-good sermon and people feeling good and going home and feeling like they can get through the week. It's preachers saying what God gives them to say. Now, we have to make it clear who's responsible for that. That's the office of a prophet. That's what they do. And a prophet is simply somebody that speaks exactly what God wants them to say. You see, they speak for God. And so that's an order from the Lord that you say what God gives you to say, and fear me more than you fear the people and what they're going to think about you. Now, for God to lay that kind of responsibility on a person that didn't ask for it, it also has to be something on the other side of it. In other words, what God is saying is, if I send you to warn people and your life can be in danger, then you have to trust me that however they treat you, they have me to deal with. You see that? However they treating you, I'll deal with them. Don't worry about what they can do to you and how they gonna look and them not liking you or whatever. I'll deal with them. You do what I'm telling you to do. Everybody see that? So there are benefits that come with. That's the other side of it. You warn people and they don't necessarily like it. They'll talk bad about you and find different things to say, or try to harm you some kind of way. But the upside of it is, God is the one. If God is the one that commissioned you, then basically you're standing in his place. You see that? And so whatever it is that they're doing to you, they're doing it to him. And so if God allows it, then he allows it. But then there are times when he won't allow it. You just be the leftist world. And some of you have heard me tell this, that the Lord have sent me to warn people before, about different things, and they wouldn't take heed. Preachers, to warn them, they wouldn't take heed. 2 of them are dead now. They'd still be alive had they gave heed. One of them both of them really, made war against me for no reason. Just didn't like my preaching, I guess, or like what God had to say. And they're both deceased now. And now, it would be different if I hadn't seen it before they left here. You see that? So I didn't get a phone call one day saying that they had died, and I just come up with that on my own. I saw it before it happened. That was part of the warning. You see, folks don't want to take heed. You see. So it's important that people, they understand that when God sends somebody, He's their protector. He's the one that you're really dealing with when it's all said and done. When you get a bill in the mail, you don't get mad at the mailman. You're not standing out there cussing him out. And you're not even, and even when you do have a mind to pay your bill and to be right about it, you're not paying it to the mailman. The mailman just delivers the mail. He has nothing to do with what you did with your account with these people. You see that? And so that's the way you're to look at God's ministers. When God sends them, that's between you and the Lord. He ain't got nothing to do with what the charges you've racked up in your life. You see that? And so that's the way you have to look at that. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's read verse 16 again. It says, "He that heareth you heareth me, and he that despiseth you despiseth me, and he that despiseth me despiseth him that sent me." Everybody see that? And so what happens is people stay on that shallow thinking. Well, I don't like this preacher. I don't like the way they talk. I don't feel the love, whatever the case may be. And so what do? They look for reasons to come against the man of God, but really in their heart, they have something against the word. That's what. Now God knows that, even if you don't know it. God knows it. You see that? Two of the wildest preachers, two of the greatest preachers God ever sent, and sent them in the same spirit, look like crazy men to the rest of the world. Elijah and John the Baptist. Wild men, look like cavemen with the way that they dressed. They didn't have any garments except just a leather girdle around their middle parts. That's it. Look like cavemen. Wild looking. And that's the way God will do it. You see that? God's prophets, they always outside of time. They don't care about style, nothing like that. And that's what makes them shake up people that's in, that try to be in style all the time, or that's following the ways of the world. God's prophets, they were that way before they were born. You see, God knew who they were, and so God pick and choose what time era they come in, you see. But to them, it doesn't matter. Bell bottoms are in, tight legs are in. None of that matter to them. You see that? That's for folks that's in the devil's time. You see, that's folks in the world pay attention to all of that. God's prophets don't care anything about what style is of the day. You see? Because trust me, hell ain't got no style. It's just hot there. You see? And so the prophets of the Lord, they think eternally. They don't think about, I got to look good for the day, the day this is in. That's all vanity, you see, when it's all said and done. What was in 5 years ago is not in today. What was in 20 years ago is in today again. You see that? It's all vanity. So the question is, who's setting these rules? Why does anything go out of style? I'm going to tell you what part of that is. It's a way that the devil uses to make the children disrespect the parents. What mom and daddy did, the next generation going to make sure they don't do it. We're going to do something different. But the grandchildren are going to do exactly what the grandparents did. They're going to wear the exact same clothes. All the hairstyles, all of that's going to come right back into play. Why? It's a way that the devil uses. Your style today is what the devil used to make you despise your parents, to make you think they're old-fashioned. You see that? So let me ask you this. If you could think your parents are old-fashioned, what do you think about God? And don't you think for 1 minute God ain't hip. He ain't trying to be cool with anybody. Ain't never tried to be in anybody's in crowd. You see? So if the devil can get you to despise your parents in any manner, what do you think? How you think that's going to pass on to God? You see that? And that's one of the injustices today, I believe, that many parents make with their children, trying to be friends with them. I got 3 sons. We will never have a boys' night out. Because I'm not trying to be their friend. I'm not interested in that at all. It don't mean that we won't ever be together and out at the same time, but it ain't because I'm trying to be young like them. And you won't catch me in nobody's jersey. You see that? So, and I do that. It's not that I've never played games with them or took them out to the baseball field or whatever to play with them or anything like that, but I make sure that there's a line drawn, and God forbid they ever try to cross it. I don't care how old they get. You see that? I'm going to always know one more karate move than they do. So I draw that line. I'm going to always be your daddy. You're going to always respect me. I don't care how old I get, how senile you think I am, how crazy you think I am. You see that? You look at Noah in his tent drunk. Now, some folks today, they may think they have a right to go in there and tease daddy. Come look at daddy and look how drunk he is. Can you believe this is the one God chose to save the world, to build the big ship and save humanity? Can you believe that? The old great Noah, the prophet, in his tent drunk. Who said that? Ham? And when he went and got his other 2 brothers, what did they do? Out of reverence for their father, they felt like this is the man that God used to start this whole world all over. Everybody is a child of Noah. Now, I know sometimes we go back to Adam and Eve. Everybody is a descendant of Noah. Everybody that's living in this world come from Noah. And those 2 other sons, they understood that. So what did they do? When they went in the tent, they backed up in it, and they covered their father. You see that? And they knew, okay, well, that's whatever he's got going on, he need to work that out with the Lord. What does that have to do with me? Amen. You see that? And so when Noah came to himself, he figured out what happened. He spoke, that drunk prophet spoke against Ham. God just said, well, look, you until you stop drinking, you ain't prophesying for nothing. No, he spoke it over Ham, and it happened exactly the way Noah spoke it. You see that? And so we do our children a disservice. Some of you mamas, you want to be friends with your children. You want to dress the way they dress with your daughters. And don't you do that. You're teaching them to disrespect authority when you make them think that they're on the same level that you're on. That's the reason why I don't let children call me by my first name. You gonna call me brother, or you gonna answer me yes sir, no sir. That's to define that there's a difference between you and I. You see that? Now I don't care what your mom and daddy got going on at home. You see, some years ago when I was little, there were some children sitting in the front. Now it was a family that just started coming to church, and Brother Junior hadn't had any kind of conversation with them. And the children got to cutting up, and the daddy didn't want to do nothing. Brother Junior went over there with his switch and got the wailing on him. Now, of course, the family never came back. But the idea was, if your mom and dad ain't got enough sense, I'm going to have something for you. You know, you might be able to cut up, you see, at home, and they may not have enough sense to keep you, you know, in check in church, you see. So today, it's just a free-for-all. It's a free-for-all, it seems like. Just people can act the way they want to act. Disrespect God is like, to me, is anarchy all over the place. Everybody, you know, that's why we got so many people thinking, I got my own relationship with God. I can stay at home and hear from Him myself. That's where that come from. That's that spirit. It's the spirit of Satan, because that's the same spirit he had. That same spirit that told Satan, you know what? I'm gonna be like God. I'm gonna raise my throne above the stars of God. That same spirit that made him believe that he could do that is the same spirit that's got people thinking, you know what? I can stay at home and read the word for myself. I don't need, you know, a preacher. It's the same spirit. That spirit to say, I ain't got to go, you know. For the last few weeks, that statement that the Lord made, that's been ringing in my ears. He said, I am the way. Now, that's a bold statement for a man to make. I am the way, the truth. He didn't say I'm a truth. I'm the truth. And they're like, no man. And that's what's got some of these other folks mad at Christians. Well, y'all just so close-minded. Our master said, no man comes to the Father but by me. That's a bold statement. Nobody else ever made that claim. And ain't nobody else had the power to back it up either. He said, no man, you can't come to the Father but by me. Now what he was saying is, you need somebody to get there. You're not going to get there on your own. You see that? But what would we say in this society? You see, with all these free thinkers. New Age, you know, really anything outside of Jesus Christ is New Age in some form or fashion. You read in the Old Testament with all these different gods they had, it was all the same. It was just different names, different, just like Santa Claus. Over here, Santa Claus. Overseas, he's something else, and you know, he's getting into people's chimneys a different kind of way. Same devil. You see. And so that spirit, that Antichrist spirit, it has a problem with the authority that God sets up in His church. It has a problem with that. I'm gonna just do it my own, do it myself. Children today, and it starts small. Children today only have the sense that the parents give them when it comes to authority. You see, you do your children a disservice when you don't make them respect your authority. You're not only teaching them to disrespect you, you're setting them up for God to judge them later. Because that's what's going to happen. Unless they get saved, unless God get a hold of them, they're not going to come to that on themselves. You see that? They have to be trained. I was just talking to, earlier today, I got a call from, you remember me mentioning these small children in Georgia. A little girl named Christasia. She's, I think, 8 years old. And her little brother, Andrew. They called me today. And I guess just to give me an update on what messages they like. And so Christasia said, I like your message. We watched your message. Children need discipline. I said, really? She said, yes, sir, I like it. I can't remember now because I asked her what it was. Do you remember what she said she liked about it?
The fact that first time.
Yeah. Children are supposed to listen to their parents the first time. And then she said, "My little brother want to talk to you." So she put him on the phone. "Yes, I like your message. Children needs discipline." So I asked him what he liked about it, but he gave the phone back to his sister before he answered, you see. So she got back on the phone and told me what he liked about it. I say, "So y'all taking heed of that?" She said, "Well, we get in trouble sometimes." Okay, well, y'all need to start, But it's good to it's good for children to be raised up so that they can have something to come back to. Now, most of us, when we get grown, we lose our minds. We go out and do all kind of crazy stuff. But I'm gonna tell you, the good thing is, I'm just talking about me. Once the Lord got a hold of me, at least I had something to come back to. Well, what about these children that they're being raised and they ain't got nothing to come back to? They just grew up in crazy. Mom and daddy crazy. So that's all they know. And what I'm gonna tell you what's sad about it, when God do get a hold of them, he's gonna have to move them away from you to keep you from tainting them again. You see that? So it's not God's will for people to disrespect his authority, and that's any authority. I believe we as parents, it's our job to teach our children to respect authority so that when they get older and they become grown, they'll have some sense of how to deal with other people. When we as parents, if we don't teach our children to respect authority, they won't respect any authority. It's not just you, it's not just your parents or your next door neighbor that you're teaching them to disrespect. They're going to get in the workplace and not know how to act. Any authority, they're going to buck against it. They're going to always think they're right. Now, I'm telling you now, I'm just me. I can't stand a child that you can't tell them anything. Grown-ups either, but especially a child. You see that. Grown-ups can become stubborn as they get older and set in their ways. The children ain't got no business knowing everything. And so you teach them to respect authority, and you teach them that there are consequences that come when they disrespect authority. Now, unless they done become God and can create their own world and live in it by themselves, they need to learn to play well with others. They need to learn how to live with people and how to deal with different circumstances and things that come up. That's the reason, one of the reasons why suicide is so common today among children. Their parents are raising them to be soft. And a lot of that is because the parents aren't in their place to teach them, Buddhists just didn't come in 2000s. They've been around. And the devil was the first one. And he's been around. So you think it's just in this millennium that he decided, well, you know what? I'm going to release the spirit of bullying. Children been mean. Children been talking about other children. Today, though, the children that are being picked on and talked about, they want to commit suicide about it. And that's the reason why it's important. Parents, you teach your child, you got a devil to deal with. Even if you're not surrendered to the Lord, the devil know who you are in God, even before you know it. You see that? We raise our children to be soft because we're trying to be friends with them instead of being parents to them. You see that? Now that goes deep. Now the average fool will say, well, I just think you don't have to be mean, and I just think that doing it this way is mean. It's mean until they get to whopping you upside your head. What are they now? No, they're confused. We need to take them to go, no. We take them right back to the woodshed and whop on them. But it's anarchy. You see that? It's that spirit is what we call the spirit of anarchy. The Bible calls it the spirit of Antichrist. It just hates authority, hates God's authority. I'm telling you, and it's all over the place. You see, even in grown people. You see, grown people. That little one that grew up disrespecting mom and daddy, they become grown and don't know how to respect authority either. You see that? And that's not God's will. Let's go now to the 105th numbers of Psalms. And we're going to start reading at verse 14. Says, he suffered no man to do them wrong. Yeah, he proved kings for their sakes. Talking about his people. But this is talking about God's faithfulness to Israel. And you know how he brought them out of Egypt and their journey and things like that. In verse 15, look what it says. Saying, touch not mine anointing and do my prophets what? No harm. A lot of times when we read that scripture, we're thinking about, okay, we can't kill them. Don't punch them, when they say something wrong. That's not just talking about physical harm. Everybody understand? That's not just talking about physical harm. You can harm their reputation. You can harm, you see, in other words, what people think about them because you speak lightly of them. And I've heard so many people in today's age come against this scripture, but it means exactly what he said, what it says. You see. And you hear the devil say, well, we're all children of God, except we're not. We're not all prophets. And we're harping on that today because they are the spokesmen for God. When they speak, it's God speaking. You see that? And so with that comes God putting his hedge around them to protect them. Now, it is important. You know what happens when parents try to be friends with their children and there's no line drawn. The words of that parent doesn't mean as much. So you play with them. You have your girly or boy talk with them, whatever. And then you try to tell them to take out the trash and then they ignore you. Now, as long as you was talking about, let's go hang out at the movies. Let's go to the mall and go shopping and buy Borex or whatever you're buying. They hear all of that. But you tell them something they don't want to hear, they deaf all of it. You got to cast the deaf spirit out of it. And that's what happens when people get common with the authority of the Lord. They sit right here, God's talking to them. The whole time it's going over, I didn't know you were talking to me. I didn't know that message was for me. Yeah, it was for you when you were sitting here. But you can get so common and think that, oh, we best buddies, that everything they say now is, you don't take it to heart the way that you should. And that's not God's will. And so God, there aren't very many people that can be around ministers of God and still have the reverence for them that they should have. There was a lady some years ago, she told me, she said, yeah, I remember when your daddy, she said, I remember when your daddy was living. You know, he played around with people and joked with them, but she said that sometimes folks would forget about him as far as his reputation. They cross a line, and he put him back across that line. And she said what he would say was, "Whoa, daddy-o." And whenever he said that, everybody knew what that meant. Get on back across that line, you know. And it made me remember when I was a little boy, and I was on the side of my daddy, and I had asked him a question. Now I just have to be up front about it, and I just showing you how we're supposed to reverence our parents. You know, I was only about 4 years old, so I didn't have a lot of sense about different things. And I had asked him a question about the male anatomy, because I didn't know anything about any of that. So I asked him a question, and he was just kind of, I can't remember now what he might have been watching TV or something like that, and just kind of off into that, or he may have just been thinking or something, and because we weren't having a conversation or anything. And so when I asked him about it, he raised his head up and said, "Now, what did you say?" And I got quiet because I thought, oh, that's the way I felt like I done asked the wrong, okay, I won't talk about that anymore with you. But he said it with such a stern voice, I was afraid not to answer him. So I asked him, but this time I was more gentle. Like, please don't knock my head off. So I asked him again, and he actually answered the question for me and went into detail about it. And see, so I think about that at times, because I think about how we as children are supposed to reverence their parents. You see that? And you're supposed to have so much respect for them that you're not just running off at the mouth. And I'm not saying being afraid of them, but yes, being afraid of them. Everybody understand? A child ought to always respect their parent enough to have that reverential fear for them or of them, that they don't get too comfortable with them. You see. Let's go real quick to the first chapter of 2 Kings. Speaking of my dad, I think that we need to have so much reverence for our authorities, the people that we have in our life as authority. And some of you, you hear me talk about them sometimes, you would think we lived a whole lifetime together. It was only 6 years. Only 6 years. And we were in this earth together. But I had, and I don't have a whole lot of memories, but in those 6 years, I learned a lot, and it's like God taught me a lot just in those times that we had together, that we were in this world together. So I think that we need to have reverence, so much reverence for our parents. Now, again, my dad died when I was 6. But I had so much reverence for him that even after his death, if I got in trouble or I found myself in a certain situation, I would think, now I wonder what he would say to me if he was here. What would he do how would I present this to him? And what would be his advice? What would be the advice that he would give me? Would he be disappointed? You know, would he be mad at me for doing the different things? Anytime I got in trouble, I mean in real serious trouble, and I got caught doing whatever it was, I always thought, man, it's probably a good thing he's not here to see this. It wasn't about me, like, man, what are people going to think about me? It was about, you know, me casting that aura on his name, especially since I carry his name. You see that? And that's the way God wants us to reverence him. That he don't have to be here every day, hobnobbing with us, drinking coffee with us, or doing whatever, for us to have the mind, God, what do you think about it? You see, what would you do? What is your advice? You see that? And now that brings us to this. The first chapter of the book of 2 Kings, we're going to start reading at verse 1. It says, Then Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab. And Ahaziah fell down through a lattice in his upper chamber that was in Samaria, and was sick. And he sent messengers and said unto them, Go inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall recover of this disease. But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, Arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say unto them, Is it not because there is not a God in Israel that ye go to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Everybody see that? Now, therefore, thus said the Lord, Thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone up, but shalt surely die. And Elijah departed. Now, who was Ahaziah? He was the son of Ahab. Ahab didn't have a relationship with God. What does God care if he's going to inquire of Beelzebub, or whether or not he's going to get well or not? Everybody understand? Ahaziah didn't have a relationship. But why was it? What was the problem that Ahab had and that the offspring of Ahab had? They didn't like Elijah. And so what they decided to do, we're going to bypass Elijah. Everybody understand? That's why Elijah wasn't the only prophet at that time. But who did God send? Elijah, you go meet him. If the issue was just God himself, he just wouldn't have recovered. It didn't matter who he'd go inquire of. God would have just struck him dead, and that would have just been the end of it. But why did God include Elijah in on this? For one reason. You're not going to bypass who I've sent. See, that's what Ahaziah was doing. Go inquire of Beelzebub. We're going to bypass Elijah. Go inquire of him. You see that subtle disrespect there? And so God caught it. Now Elijah was going on with his life, living, doing whatever he was doing. All of that with Ahab, that was over with because Ahab was dead. But God sent Elijah to tell him, you go warn them. They're on their way to see Beelzebub, but you catch them before they get there. Let them know they're not going to get around you. You see that? That's that little subtle disrespect there is what was going on. Verse 5, And when the messengers turned back unto him, he said unto them, Why are ye now turned back? And they said unto him, There came a man up to meet us, and said unto us, Go turn again unto the king that sent you, and say unto him, Thus said the Lord, Is it not because there is not a God in Israel, that thou sendest to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone up, but shalt surely die. And he said unto them, What manner of man was he which came up to meet you, and told you these words? And they answered him, He was an hairy man, and girt with a girdle of leather about his loins. And he said, It is Elijah the Tishbite. Everybody see that? How did he know Elijah? You see that? Why did he even ask that question? Because that was the one he was trying to get around. I can go talk to God for myself. You see? Same spirit. You still inquiring of Beelzebub. Verse 9, Then the king sent unto him a captain of 50 with his 50, And he went up to him, and behold, he sat on the top of an hill. And he spake unto him, Thou man of God, the king hath said, Come down. And Elijah answered and said to the captain of 50, If I be a man of God, then let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50. And there came down fire from heaven and consumed him and his 50. Again also he sent unto him another captain of 50 with his 50, and he answered and said unto him, O man of God, thus hath the king said, Come down quickly. And Elijah answered and said unto them, If I be a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume thee and thy 50. And the fire of God came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. And he sent again. Everybody see that? This is the third time. It wasn't that the news hadn't got back to him about the other 102 people that were killed. Verse 13, and he sent again a captain of the third 50 with his 50. And the third captain of 50 went up and came and fell on his knees before Elijah and besought him and said unto him, O man of God, I pray thee, let my life and the life of these 50 thy servants be precious in thy sight. Behold, there came fire down from heaven and burnt up the two captains of the former 50s with their 50s. Therefore, let my life now be precious in thy sight. And the angel of the Lord said unto Elijah, Go down with him. Be not afraid of him. And he arose and went down with him unto the king. Everybody see what the difference was? The first two didn't have any kind of reverence for him. Let's go look at that again. Verse 9. Then the king sent unto him a captain of 50 with his 50. And he went up to him, and behold, he sat on top of the hill, and he spake unto him, what? Thou man of who? So they said he was a man of God. But look at what does it say next? The king hath said, Come down. Do you see the reverence there? Yeah, you're a man of God, but you need to do what the king is telling you to do. Yeah, I don't care about who you're praying for. I don't care about all that. Nothing about your spiritual life. You need to come over here and do what the king said to do. Everybody see that? The second one, the same thing. Thou man of God. The king has said, Come down. The third one, what did they do? They bowed down and said, Thou man of God, let our life be. They didn't give him any orders. Let our life be precious in your sight. They didn't say nothing about the king, said nothing. The Lord came and told him, Go with him. Don't be afraid of him. Why? Because the first two groups were going to try to harm him. You see that? Verse 15, and the angel of the Lord said unto Elijah, Go down with him, be not afraid of him. And he arose and went down with him unto the king. And he said unto him, Thus said the Lord, Forasmuch as thou hast sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, is it not because there is no God in Israel to inquire of his word? Therefore, thou shalt not come down off that bed on which thou art gone up, but shalt surely die. So why did God put this story in this Bible? It's to show us how God protects those that he sends. You see that? Those first two groups, they had no reverence for Elijah whatsoever. They didn't care if he was a man of God or not. You come down, and I'm sure after Elijah was done, saying whatever he was going to say, they were going to probably take him off and try to kill him. So God was making a statement. You see that? It's what he was doing with the first two. You see that? And God is still doing that same thing today. Let's go now to the second chapter of 2 Kings. And we'll start reading in verse 23. Now they were wanting to do Elijah some harm, physically so. But let's look at something else here. The 23rd verse, 2 Kings, the second chapter. This is talking about Elisha now. It says, and he went up from thence unto Bethel, and as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children. Everybody see that? Out of the city. And mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. And he turned back and looked on him and did what? No, they're just little children. You know, little children, they're going to be little children. They don't know any better. You know, they're going one day they're going to get saved and they're going to come back and ask for forgiveness. These were little children. Little children. Elisha, a grown man that ought to be able to get over it, right? That's what we think. These little children, you know, children gonna be children. And he turned back and looked on them and cursed them in the name of who? It wasn't because his feelings were hurt, in other words. Again, everything you see in the Bible is in there for a reason. God didn't tell the writers, no, look, don't write that. That was just, you know, Elisha was having a bad day. Don't put that in there. He got his feelings hurt. I dealt with it. I talked with him about it, you know, wrote him up or whatever. He's good now. God was showing what he thinks about. What were they doing? They were harming him. We don't reverence you, and so we're going to find something about you that we don't like, and we're going to talk about it. So you may wonder, well, why is that such a big deal? You know why? Because you'll harm their ministry to other people. And just because you don't like them, you don't like how he dress or whatever the case may be, you speak bad about them, who are you speaking to? Somebody that they're supposed to reach. Now you done pass it on. Now they can't hear it either. You've been closed, stopped up your ears from it. You see that? And so now you're teaching people not to hear what they need to hear. And God ain't going to say, well, you know what? Since y'all done lost respect for him, let me send somebody else. Let me send somebody that dresses the way you like. Let me send somebody that wear their hair the way you like. You see that? And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tare 42 children of them. Everybody see that? What did he do? Pray and ask the Lord? No. He went on back to where he come from. Look what it says. And he went from thence to Mount Carmel, and from thence he returned to Samaria. He didn't go and knock on their mom and daddy's door. And did you know little Johnny was out here, you know, cutting up? He didn't go and knock on that door. Look, before I curse him, you better come get him. No. This was written for our learning. You see that? The Bible makes it clear we're going to give an account for every idle word. Every idle word that's spoken. We're going to give an account of it. It doesn't matter if you done got over it or you done forgot about it. You see that? God will remind you when you're standing before him. And so that's why it's important that if we're going to fear God, we have to fear who he sends. That's part of fearing God. You see that? Now, either you think that God ain't sending nobody and everybody's a false prophet, or you think that you just don't reverence God at all. You see that? Let's go look at one more scripture. Let's go to the 12th chapter of the book of Numbers. We're going to just read through a few scriptures here. We're going to start at verse 1. And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, Hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. So you see that? That's that anarchist spirit I'm telling you about. That spirit of, God speaks to me too. You see that? Brother Bowling ain't the only one that have dreams and they come to pass. And God will hear that. You see that? Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. Now the problem, why did God put that in the Bible? Was that part of Aaron and Miriam's discussion? How would they know that? How would they know? They didn't know. The point, so why did God put that in the Bible? The point is, you ought to be careful what you're talking with your mouth, because you don't know how God sees something. In their mind, God speaks to us just like he speaks to Moses. But what was the difference? Moses was the meekest billions of people in this world, and Moses was the meekest of all of them. You see the difference now? That wasn't something God put out there before they started following him. But here's what you ought to know. If God put somebody in authority and in a place and in a position, he knows why he done it. It ain't like it is on your job where you don't know why your boss hired this person. Every time you turn around, they leaning up against the wall sleeping. So God gives us his word to keep us from making the same mistakes that these people made. You don't have to know what God knows behind the scenes. And trust me when I tell you, God's ministers ain't trying to prove anything to you either. Moses wasn't walking around thinking, you know I'm the meekest man, right? He might not have even known that. You see that? So that's why it's important. Let's say even for young ones. Let's think about Saul. After God told Samuel, "You go anoint David," I'm taking I'm taking that Saul's position and giving it to somebody that's better than him. Samuel wept for Saul, and God asked him, "Why are you still weeping for him, seeing that I've rejected him?" For the next 16 years, Saul chased a man that could have easily killed him. Wasn't afraid of him. Could have easily have killed him. He wasn't afraid of Goliath. That had already taken place. But the Bible says that David ran out of fear. But what kind of fear was it? Was it the kind of, I don't want any part of you because I know you the big bad wolf? No, it was, and you read about it because David says it. Why were you not afraid to touch God's anointed when the man came that helped to kill Saul? Why were you not afraid? And what did David do? He took out his sword and chopped that man, ordered his servant to chop that man in pieces. You know, why were you not afraid? So what happens is, we have to learn. I don't care how a preacher have failed or what you think about him. David failed. But God restored him. And everybody that had something to say afterwards, after he fell, they had to pay the price for it. Listen, whenever somebody falls, in God's eyes, God is looking for a way to restore them, not to keep his foot on their neck. You see, it doesn't matter what somebody is caught up in now. You see that? Now, but what happens, and I'm going to tell you why people do that, it's their lack of love. You see, and I can only tell it to you the way the Lord told me. Love sees what a person is going to become. So if you're living in what they're going to become, you're not thinking about what they did today and how they need to grow today. So you ain't got no room to put them down on how they need to grow today. You ain't got no business, and I'm going to just put it out there. You ain't got no business saying anything about anybody and you're not willing to help them grow.
Amen.
You see that? Don't say anything against anybody unless you're participating in their growth.
Other than that, you're a scorner. You're gonna talk about something that ain't gonna help the problem at all. So what is so what did that make you? David didn't kill Saul because he still respected that man. Didn't matter what Saul had done. God had rejected him. David had so much integrity. I'm not going to speak anything against him. I'm not going to kill him. David chose to run for 16 years and lived outside of something that he had been anointed to do as king for 16 years. Not us. God had anointed me king. So Saul, it's time for you to go. God has done a new thing. That's what made David such a great king. See, when he walked in that house, Samuel didn't just throw that all on him and take off running. He knew what that was about. He knew, in other words, from a young age that he was king and was made king by God. And he had so much of integrity that he chose not to pursue it. It all happened in God's time. And I'm not going to tear the next man down to take what I know is rightfully mine. Amen. That man Saul, he was king for 16 years after God rejected him. And David, knowing full well, one day I'm going to sit in his place. And you know what? David remained friends with his son. David didn't say, well, you know what, Jonathan? You the enemy too. I want you to think about something. As long as Saul was king, even after Saul was dead, had it not happened the way that it happened, David could have looked at it as, Jonathan is a threat to me as well. Not only do I have to deal with his crazy daddy, I need to separate myself from him, because even if Saul does die, then what's going to happen with Jonathan? You see, he'll be coming after me as well. But David walked by faith. And he had so much faith and love that he chose, I'm not going to do anything against this man. I'm going to walk in integrity towards him. Yeah, I know he crazy. Every time I go sing for him, he wanting to kill me. But you know what it was? David had love and compassion. I'm going to tell you something. When you have love, you see people in a different light. David didn't, in other words, when you have love for people, it is impossible. Now, if you're writing, I want you to write this. When you have genuine love for people, it is impossible to see yourself as a victim. You know why? Because the person who you would naturally think is victimizing you, you see that they're the ones that really need help. You see where they are spiritually. And your heart would go out to them. You see. All right, so we'll go back to this now. Chapter 12, book of Numbers, verse 3 says, Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses, and unto Aaron, and unto Miriam, Come out, ye three, unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. And the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud, and stood in the door of the tabernacle, and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. And he said, Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I the Lord will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently. Now there's a reason why we're reading this. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. And the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. In other words, I will show myself to him. look at what that says. Wherefore, in other words, why? Why then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? Now, to get a real understanding of this, you have to go backwards from this scripture. He asked them, why were you not afraid to speak against Moses? Why would he ask that? Because of what he said previously. Moses have seen me. Just him seeing me, the kind of relationship that he has with me, that should have made you have enough sense not to speak against him. Everybody see that? You see how he differentiates between Moses and others before Moses? If there's a prophet among you, I'll make myself known to him in visions and dreams, things like that. I'll make myself known. He said, but with this one, it's not so. I've actually shown myself to him. Now, if that's the case, that should have made you know you ain't gonna get away with that. You see how God is trying to teach reverence here? Now, Miriam and Aaron, they weren't just off the block themselves. Miriam was a prophetess. Aaron was Moses' prophet and a priest, the high priest, the first high priest of that era. So God didn't let them get away with it because of their positions. You see that? God made a difference there. You see. So that tells us we can, you see what God says there. You should have known better than speaking against him. In other words, because of his relationship with me, you should have feared him. Now we can back up and go back to what we talked about with Elijah. Look at what they came up and said. Man of God. And what was Elijah's response? If I am a man of God, then let fire come down and consume you and your 50. In other words, if you really believe, Captain, that I'm a man of God, you wouldn't be coming up here to try to harm me. So let me show you that I really am. Now, this is not to add pride. You see in the New Testament, when Jesus was rejected around his disciples, and the disciples said, Lord, do you want us to pray like Elijah did and make fire come down and consume these people? And the Lord said, you don't know what spirit you are of. He said, I didn't come to take life. I came to people to give life. So we're not teaching this as a fire from heaven class. This is how you get people that's coming against you. We're teaching, but God's mind have never changed about fear and about reverence. You see that? His mind has never changed about it. He still wants us to have reverence for people. And he still wants us to have fear. He wants us to respect. And see, in this, especially in this nation, we've gotten away from that. You know, this is one of the most disrespectful nations you'd ever want to live in. You go over to Japan. You know, them people, they still bowing down to one another. The sons come in and bow down to their fathers. They respect their parents. Over here, it bothers me. You watching and you see in the news how everybody's having a meeting now at different churches. Let's see how we can solve the crime problem. These youth, we got to give them something to do. You know, that's the reason why they out shooting people, because we ain't got a pool for them to swim in or whatever. When you don't make your children respect your authority, eventually they will learn to respect life, learn not to respect life. Life won't mean anything to them. They'll be able to take somebody's life and then go out and eat lunch. It don't matter to them. If they don't respect your life, they're not going to respect anybody else's either. You see that? So we are too busy dealing with the aftermath of our spiritual issues instead of dealing with the root of it. You have to teach your children to fear God and to fear those that are in authority over them. You see that? Because they're really one and the same. Doesn't matter, and I'm talking to some of you grown folks as well. I don't care if your parents aren't saved. Every time you talk to them, every other word might be a cuss word. And you still need to fear them and reverence them. Because I'm going to tell you where the devil will get you at. You may have been raised by some renegades. But if you disrespect those renegades, you're not going to find certain people to respect. It's going to go with you across the board. You see that? It will be impossible for you to disrespect your parents, no matter how unsaved they are, and then turn around and respect everybody else and reverence everybody else. It's impossible. You ought to respect them just because they're your parents, regardless of what you think they've done for you in the past. Amen. I don't care if they didn't provide for you. You see that? Amen. If you believe that God gives life and your mother and father are the reason, and God used them to bring you to this world, He intends for you to honor and respect them. Amen. They could have been the worst parents in the world. God intends for you to honor them. You see that? All right, we'll open it up now for questions or comments.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think you already answered this a long time ago, but I can't remember the answer. But, like, say if you didn't grow up addressing your parents as yes ma'am and like no sir, or things like that. Like, and you want to start doing that now to honor them, but what if they feel like uncomfortable about that and they may say like, I don't want you to address me like that. So what do you tell them?
Well, you respect what their wishes are. And if they don't want you to address them like that, then don't do that. But I can tell you, some parents, they don't like, and some people, I just put it that way, some people, especially older people, don't like the ma'am and sir because of their own issues of getting old. You see that? Like, they feel old, a lot of them, not everybody, but a lot of them, they feel like if you referring to them as ma'am or sir, then that makes them feel old. Well, you know, like the old people used to say, the only way not to get old is to what? Die young. So what's your preference? You don't get to have it both ways, you see. Yeah, so you just if you come across people like that, then you respect what their wishes are. You know, of course, let them know why you're saying it. You know, this is my way of honoring you. But you know, it's not just the ma'am and sir. It's the way that you treat people. You know, children can say ma'am and sir all day long and still not respect or honor you at all. So it's really more about the way that you treat people. Ma'am and sir is just a way to address who you honor. But, you know, it's about how you treat people as well, you see. That's what it's really more about. All right, does that answer your question? All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? Well, I know we do, so let's just come on with them.
talking about love sees what a person will become, and that you shouldn't really be saying anything about anybody if you're not gonna help them to grow. So I think it's really easy, like whenever we see people's shortcomings, to identify those shortcomings or even talk about them. But if that talk does not follow up with you seeking the Lord for how you could be a blessing to partake in helping them to grow, then it shouldn't be you having a conversation about it, but maybe just going to the Lord about it or something. Like if you see somebody doing something that needs to grow, should you just go to the Lord about it? Or, like, you know what I'm saying? If you're not, because you said don't say anything about it if you're not going to help them to grow. So should you just go to the Lord directly about it and ask, like, if there's something that you could do to be a participant in their growth process or something? How do you deal with that?
Let's go to the book of John real quick. I'll answer it that way. The 15th chapter of the book of John. We're going to start reading at verse 1. It says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Everybody see that? It means the farmer. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. Now, verse 3 is the verse I want you to pay attention to. Now ye are clean through what?
The word.
Everybody see that? Which I have spoken unto you. When we come across someone, and I'm going to tell you, just me, even if I see what I perceive to be a shortcoming, of course, I preach God's word, so I know that God's word is what does the cleansing. Outside of that, there's nothing that we can do. Now, that's why it's important. I want you to think about something. In a lot of these false churches, they're packed to capacity for one reason only. Because the people that are in that church, they believe in what their pastors are saying. And they believe their pastor has what's needed to help them. Unfortunately, by the time people wake up out of false doctrine, their hearts are still damaged and are still bitter about whatever false doctrine they may have seen or heard, or the falseness in the churches that they have seen. So by the time they get to this ministry or to a ministry that God has set up, they have developed this anarchist spirit, which is why they can come across people who need to hear the word, but their first mind isn't to invite them to hear the word. Their first mind is, let me deal with them, you see. And it's not God's will. And God's got preachers that cleanses people with the word. So our mindset need to, if we're not a preacher, our mindset need to be on making sure that we ourselves are right with the Lord. There have been plenty of times I've prayed for people
And while praying for people, I'm also praying for myself, because I don't want to be one of those people with a big 2x4 in my eye and I'm trying to pull a splint out of somebody else's eye. And the reason why the Lord said it in that manner was because if we're not careful, what we perceive to be shortcomings in other people is really through our own lenses. You see what I mean? And so let me just bring it to the word. If many of us had been in the days of Jesus, and we had been faithful members of the church, and we just happened to be in the church that Sunday when the Lord just lost it and braided a whip together and just got to whipping folks out of there and turning over. I want you to imagine what that must look like. He didn't call a meeting and say, look, y'all shouldn't be doing that. He platted a whip together and drove those people out of the church and turned over their tables. If we had been back then looking at that, what would we have done? Went home and called ourselves praying for him, because that's his shortcoming. The Lord really needs to deal with him. That's an area he needs to grow in, you see. And that's the reason why the Lord said to judge with righteous judgment. Because all the Lord was doing was fulfilling scriptures. It was prophesied that he would do that. You see that? And so, when we see shortcomings, the first thing we do, like, one thing about me, like, I don't dwell on that, because I don't, even if I see shortcomings, even if I pray for it, that I don't just assume that people are going to remain there. And so I think the Lord wants us to bear the burdens of people, but we have to be very, very careful that we don't make ourselves the police. You see what I mean? Because then we'll move into something we ain't got no business moving into. If I see somebody, if I'm talking to somebody and they curse, my first thought isn't to pray for them because they cursed. Because I don't automatically assume that that's them. You understand what I mean? I think the best thing that we can do for people when we are around them, when we see something that maybe goes contrary to God's word, I think the best thing we can do for people is live our life in such a way to where it eats up at their conscience and it makes them want to be what they see in you. You see what I mean? I think that's the best thing that we can do for people. Of course we pray for people, but I'm telling you, even in praying for people, we have to be very, very careful that we're not moving into pride, because if we're not careful, we can think that we're better than somebody because we got to pray for them or because we see something in them. And so that's why I'm careful about that. Like, I don't want to see people doing anything wrong, But you know, there have been plenty of times I've gotten on my knees to pray for people, and then but I'm thinking about me, like, Lord, help me to be right, because that same person that I'm praying for, they may have seen something in me that's not right. And so at the same time I'm praying for them, they may be praying for me. You see that? And so I believe we ought to pray for people, you know, when we see things that's not right. You know, but also we need to pray and make sure that we saw what we saw. You see what I mean? And 'cause like I said now, you know, we have to judge with righteous judgment. We've read some stories in here about Elijah calling down fire from heaven to kill people. And that really happened. That's not a fairy tale. That really happened. We read about Elisha, you know, cursing the children and 42 of them getting ripped up. That wasn't a fairy tale. That really happened. What was it that caused that? If we were just standing by, we could say, well, you know what? Elijah and Elisha, we need to pray that if they had just had the love of God, they'd have been trying to win them souls. That was ripe. You know, that was an opportunity to really show the love of God. You see that? And so we have to be careful that we don't misjudge something because of where we are. That's where that 2x4 in our eye comes in at. You know, if Elijah had still been around when Elisha did what he did, he wouldn't have said, well, you know what, you done missed it. You got to start over in prophet class. And when Elijah called fire down from heaven, Elisha didn't say, well, you know what, I can't follow you. You're a mean, mad prophet. You see that? So we have to judge with righteous judgment, in other words, in the different situations, you know. We have to make sure we judge with righteous judgment. You could say, just to give you just an everyday example, you may notice there are times I raise my voice when I'm speaking. And there have been times I pray, Lord, I don't want to raise my voice. I want to be soft-spoken like you, because the Bible says that you weren't heard in the streets. You know, that's what it prophesied about him. You weren't heard in the streets. And you know what the Lord did? He took me right to his word. Cry loud. You see that? So you see what I mean with I want to be like you, Lord. But that was him. You see that? That wasn't for me. The Lord told me what to do in Isaiah, I think it's the 58th chapter. Cry loud. Spare not. You see that? So that's what I mean. Judge with righteous judgment. You know, we have to be careful that we do that. But God's word is what cleanses people. His word is what cleanses them. You see? Does that answer your question? All right. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Kind of comment on that too, because that's something the Lord's been dealing with me about was not seeing people shortcomings all the time, or just other things. And just a few days ago, probably, I think, I was somebody had crossed my mind, and I was thinking about some things, and then the Lord just kind of just cut it off real fast. It was just kind of like, okay, you wouldn't be sitting here thinking about that. It's kind of like what you say, that you're not going to be doing anything, and there's no point in you thinking, oh, this person is this way or that way, or they're not doing this or they're doing that. My thought came like, if this person is gonna cross my mind, then just pray for them. Don't just sit there and like dwell on the shortcomings or whatever it is that you're seeing. And then also what you said in the last part about how you can't respect one group of people and then not respect another group of people. Like if you're disrespectful over here, or if you don't have reverence over here, then you won't have reverence for anybody.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? Anyone
else want to share? Yes.
I agree with that. I feel like that's a big deal as far as trying to respect your parents. I've seen that a lot with people. Like when I'll meet them and then I'll find out they talk to their parents crazy, and then I can see how it affects other areas. It affects relationships a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all.
Yeah. And we can get tainted, you know. Just like even going back to when somebody crosses our mind or we see a shortcoming in somebody, if we're not careful, we'll be looking at that, and that's all we'll see. And it can cause us to be judgmental of people in a bad way. You know, you're not. And so if I become judgmental of somebody in a bad way, and when I say in a bad way, I mean I'm just looking at their shortcomings, I'm not trying to help them up or anything like that, not even praying for them, then what does that do on the other side? Huh? Not no, on the other side. So, let me put it. Huh? Makes you high-minded. It makes you look. The only way you can look down on somebody is if you've lifted yourself up. You see that? So it can make you high-minded. You see that? It can make you high-minded. That's not God's will. I don't live in my past, but I'm always aware of what a rascal I was when I'm dealing with people. And I always feel like if it was hope for me, somebody prayed for me somewhere, then it's hope for others. And it's important that, you know, and the only way I got to, not saying that I'm anywhere, but the only way that I got to where I am now is God saw me there. If God dealt with me where I was, I wouldn't be here. See, and that's the way we have to be when we're dealing with people. You deal with people, you have to see them through God's eyes. Now, other than that, we ain't got no business seeing them. You see? And so we deal with people where God sees them. You treat them like they already there. And they'll get there. Yeah, so that's the Lord's will. And then you have to know too that some people just have to grow. You know, and this is what I mean. You have a child, a baby. If you're not careful, you're a parent. You've been driving since you was 16, and you had that little 1-month-old baby. You don't start praying, Lord, let them drive. Lord, please help them get whatever it is in their lives out of there so they can drive. No, they're born. Someday they'll drive. And just right now, they're not there yet. You see that? And so that's the way the Lord sees it. Sometimes, if we're not careful, we can be praying for something somebody's not there. They're just not ready for. That they just got to grow. The main thing is that they're saved. And if they stay saved, they'll get wherever they need to be. You see that? In the Lord. And that's the way you
You deal with it just like you deal with a child. You see that? When they come here, you're not praying for them to be a good driver. They'll be one day. You let them grow. You see that? And you don't try to force it on them. You see. And so God, and just like a child, you can take a 5-year-old. They may think they can drive, but they're mentally not ready yet. There's a reason why there's a law, concerning what age people need to drive at, because mentally they're not ready yet. And God knows what people are ready for. So me, when I pray for people, if I see a shortcoming, just because I see it, it don't automatically kick my prayer life into gear 2 for them. If I pray for somebody, it's because I have a burden to pray for them. If I have a burden to pray for somebody and a shortcoming that they may have, it's because they should have already reached where, the point where they need to be. They should have already been there. And for some reason, there is something stopping that. You see. So. All right. Do we have anything else anyone want to share? Yes, sir.
I'm thankful for how you touched on how dangerous it is to speak against God minister, especially before someone that minister has been sent to, and you influence them to not receive anything from that minister. It's like, you working against God's purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else?
I think one of the things that really stood out was you saying don't speak against things. Even when we may not know all the details behind it, because sometimes, like we can see something and say, oh, that doesn't make sense, or whatever, make comments about it, but we don't know how God thinks about it. And so it kind of goes with speaking idle words or speaking when the Lord isn't telling you to speak. And, I think it's important that we learn to, stop, before we open up our mouth and speak against something, because as far as we know, without knowing, we may be speaking against the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And prime example, you think about it, like in Elijah's day. Elijah lived with a woman for 3 years, a widow woman, a young widow woman, and her son. And that could have looked like adultery all day long. But who was the one that called for it? You see that? Anyone else want to share anything?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between the spirit of anarchy and the spirit of pride?
It's really the same thing. People become anarchists because of pride. You know what anarchy is? Does everybody here know what an anarchist is? It's 2 words put together. Ana, meaning none, and arch, meaning like what we call a hierarchy, or something above something else. So it means no no positions, no higher position. Anarchists think that we're all equal. And that spirit is more prevalent today than what you know. When a wife thinks that she's equal to her husband in authority, she's an anarchist. When she thinks that it's 50-50, she's an anarchist. You see that? It's impossible to be 50-50 and submitted at the same time. So you have to pick and choose what you're going to do. You're going to abide by what God's word says, or you're going to go with society. Let me see how that work out for you. Let's see. If the Bible tells us, if we submit to God, let me just say that since we're here. How many of us have ever went to God and said, well, God, it's 50-50. I believe I ought to get my way. You see that? So you wives, you can't try that with your husband either. There ain't no 50-50. You see that? And let me prove it to you. When God created woman, how much of Adam did he take? Okay, that's your answer. He didn't cut him in half. You see that? Don't you fall for that old wives' tale. He took him out of his side. You see? Took her out of his side. That was just what God chose. You see that? God intends for you wives to submit to your husbands. It ain't no 50-50. When you married him, you were telling God, I trust his decision making. I tell you, just like I've told my daughters, don't marry a man, and don't marry a man if you can't submit to him. If you can't submit, you ain't got no business marrying. Now, if you want to get married and you ain't the submitting type, then what you need to ask yourself, what do you want to get married for? It's selfishness. You just want somebody to help pay bills and to lay up with every now and then. You see that? You need to know that God has sent that man to stabilize you, to help to balance you, and y'all really balance one another. You really need each other. You see that? Well, if you know that you're in balance without a man, how are you gonna try to run him when you get with him? You gonna make him like you, silly and emotional. You see? No. So. All right. Do we have anyone else? All right. I want to share a couple of dreams that I had. Well, it was a dream and a vision. So the dream that I had, I think I had it a couple of nights ago. I dreamed that I was in a classroom, and I was in a classroom, and I excused myself from the classroom. And I went out in the hallways. I think I was supposed to be going to use the bathroom or something. But I was out in the hallway, and I run into a relative of mine, and he had like he told me, he spoke to me and said, hey man, have you seen this? And I said, no, I hadn't seen it. He pulled out a case. It was a pen, like a regular writing pen, except it was thick. It was like that thick. He pulled out a case and he opened it up, and it had this thick pen in it. And my immediate thought was that the pen was valuable. You know how if you keep something in a case, it's apparently valuable. So I had just had a mind that this was valuable, this pen that he had. And he said, look at how I take it apart, you know. And so he took it apart, and when he took it apart, he couldn't put it back together. So I told him, I said, well, here, let me try. So I tried. I couldn't get it back the way it was. And so I said, well, I'll tell you, let me take it to class. Let me take it to class with me, and I'll try. So by the time I got back to class was almost over. and the people were all still, the students were all still sitting at their desk, and they had just completed an assignment that had been handed out after I had left. And so I asked the teacher for the, assignment. She put it on my desk. And I'm looking at it just like I'm looking at this Bible, and I see words. It was supposed to be like a math class. I see words, but I don't know how to work the problems. Like there aren't, like in the dream it was like a math class, and I knew that it was supposed to be a number for the answer, but it was all words there, and they weren't word problems. You see, they weren't like word equations. So I'm looking at it, and even though I'm looking at it just like I'm looking at my Bible, I couldn't make out what the words were saying to even work the problem. And then I understood that this was stuff that was learned while I was gone. She taught this lesson while I was gone. And so I just couldn't, so my thinking was, I want to learn how to do the problem so that I can do all of it. But my teacher said, your first answer is 40. She said, if you write 40, I'll give you 15. So right before she said that, I had put the pen back together. So the pen was working. But see, so she said, if you write down 40, I will give you 15. Now, of course, in my mind, that being in a class setting, I'm thinking, she's giving me one answer, and I'm going to make 15%, grade instead of 100. I'll get 15. And I was thinking, okay, I guess 15 is better than 0 for not, filling out any. But my thinking was, just show me how to do it. Just show me the lesson, and I can do it all. That was my thought. But she just walked in. I'm sitting at the desk just like I'm sitting at this one. She walked in front of my desk. She was going from desk to desk. And when she got to mine, she pointed at the first problem. She put a finger on it. And she said, if you write down 40, I'll give you 15. So I wrote down 40, just like she said. And then she put 15 at the top of my paper. But I was a little frustrated because my thought was, if you just teach me the lesson, if you just teach it, I can do it all and I can get it done. I can make 100. See, that was my thinking. And then, about a week before that dream, I was just looking over my dream, just looking over the visions and dreams, because I keep like all the notes, all of my dreams in one place. So I was just reading over them and listening to them. And last week sometime, I had a vision. This wasn't a dream. I was wide awake. And I looked in my windowsill, and there was a jar. Just like I see this little tablet here. It was just like that in real life. There was a jar in my window, and in that jar, it had 15 little lights in it. 15 lights. And I didn't know that they were 15 because I counted them. It was just when I saw it, I just automatically understood that it was 15. So those two go together. I don't know how. But I'm going to tell you, does anybody get anything about that? I'm going to tell you what my thought is about it. I was looking at a whole page of problems. The teacher in the dream represented the Lord. I had this pen that was very, very expensive, very, precious, I guess you could say. After I fixed it and got back to the classroom, I had missed a lesson, like whatever was being taught. But it was like the teacher wasn't concerned about teaching me the lesson. the teacher was only concerned about me writing down 40. And I couldn't even see the problems. I couldn't even, it was like the whole page was a blur. I could see the words, but then at the same time, I couldn't see them. It was like that was hid from me. And I understood, of course, they was like 1 through 10 or something like that. My thought, this is what came to me about it. Of course, you know, we've been looking for some property. And the property that we have come across, they want $50,000 for it. And I believe that's the property that the Lord wants us to get. They want $50,000 for it. I believe, now this is what I believe with my heart, until the Lord showed me different. This is what came to me. And you know, you have to learn too, these things are by faith. You know, I can tell you most of the things that I get from the Lord is because that's the way I feel. You see what I mean? That's the way I believe. It's not, if I was sitting back and the Lord spoke something to me, or a feeling come to me, I still be sitting here if I'm waiting on the Lord to give me 2 and 3 signs of whether or not it's really Him. You see, I have to move on it regardless. Everybody understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's the way it is with messages. I get a feeling that I'm supposed to preach on something. That's what I preach on. I don't wait on the Lord to come down every week and say, hey, this is what I want you to preach on. You know, and what I mean when I say come down, I mean literally come down and talk to me face to face. So it's that same way with visions and dreams. I have them and I get a feeling that it's supposed to be that way. The Lord reveals different things in different ways, you see. And so a lot of times it's just an unction, I guess you could say, that I have that is that way. And so what I believe is my wife and I, we found this property. The people want $50,000 for it. And, you know, we could go about it 1 or 2 ways. Now, we don't have that kind of cash just around. It could be that the Lord want us to I guess raise the money, if that make any sense. Or He could want us to finance it just like you finance any property. I don't know which way the Lord wants us to go. And I think that's part of what the Lord was showing me about when I sat down and that assignment was put in front of me and I couldn't see. I was just told what to write for the first answer. Now I believe what the Lord was showing me was to make an offer for $40,000. I believe that's what He was showing me. And see, now the rest of it was hid for me. In my mind, just tell me how to do it and I'll do it all. But see, as you heard me say before, the Lord, you take the first step and then He leads you through. He's not going to show you the whole picture. You think about it. What teacher wouldn't be concerned with teaching you the lesson and then just letting you work all the problems yourself? I was given the answer. And the answer was, for the first one, you write down 40 and I will give you 15. You see what I mean? So I believe what the Lord was showing me, writing down 40 was the offering 40. And the only thing I know how to do is walk by faith in it. You see? And I believe that's the reason why the rest of that was blank to me. I couldn't see the first problem. I could see it, but I couldn't see it, if that makes any sense. Like, I could see it, but it was just, I couldn't read it. The words were plain, but I couldn't read it. So I believe what the Lord was showing me, I believe that was the first step. You make an offer. Let me worry about how it's going to get all of that. You see that? And it's one of those things I don't want to let slip, you see. Because if you're not careful, you can sit on something that the Lord have shown you, and you'll miss it altogether. You'll be done miss everything God has for you if you're waiting on confirmation every time. You see, the Bible makes it clear. You try the Spirit to see whether they are of God. In other words, you'll miss them all the time if you're not stepping out. You're going to have to step out at some point. You see that? So that's what we want to do. I want to say this to everyone in the ministry too, that it's time for us to move on to some property and start building what the Lord wants us to build. Of course, we're talking about the food pantry, all those different things that the Lord wants to use this ministry to do to help people when they move here, be a blessing to them as well, to help train people that are transitioning from prison back into the real world. All these things the Lord want to do. And one thing, as I've said before, all of this, everything that God want to do, He don't just drop it out of the sky into our laps. It has to be something that we participate in, something that we take part in. Everybody understand? As I've said before, the Lord showed me this house. Showed me that it was mine. But I still have to pay for it. And the people that owned it, the bank that owned it, they didn't just come give it to me. The Lord He showed me it was mine. Basically, what He was saying was, I'm going to give you it's yours because it's ordained to be yours, and I'm going to give you the means to pay the mortgage on it. Still had to go to closing. You see that? I had to go through all of the steps that I had to go through, that anybody else have to go through. So I guess what I'm saying is, everything ain't going to be a miracle. Not the way you think of it, where everything ain't going to be the testimony of, do you know, somebody just walked up to me and just gave me the key to a house and said, this is the Lord spoke to me and told me it ain't going to always happen like that. Sometimes it's going to be, you know what? It was meant for us to have this property, and the Lord blessed us with the finances to get it. Now, how's that happening? Are we planting money trees? We have to believe in what God have commissioned us to do. And it's not going to always come by God giving it to us. That's the whole story of the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, going into the promised land. They had to work for that. Everybody understand? God told them, I gave it to you, but they had some folks in there that they had to push out. In other words, when God got something for you, the devil ain't just going to sit back and let you get it. Other than that, it wouldn't be a faith walk. You see that? It wouldn't be a faith walk if it was just handed to you. So, I believe that this property is what the Lord wants us to have for that, for this particular area. And we're going to try to move forward in it and try to obtain that. So I want you all to be prayerful about that, that the Lord will give us favor with that, And like I said, now I can only speak what I believe and what I've seen. I can't, I believe it by faith, if that makes any sense. The same way I believe God exists and He lives on the inside of me by faith. You see that? And so that's something that we want to move forward in, is trying to obtain this property for the ministry and to do the work of the Lord. And I'm speaking this for everybody that don't know. The Lord have shown me that the day will come and we'll have a TV station to broadcast in that area as well. And this, there's a reason why this property is out in the country. You see that? Because that's where we could be the most effective, especially when it comes to putting up antennas and things like that have to go up for that reason, for broadcasting over the air. You see. And so I tell you, make this offer of $40,000, and they accept it. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think that's a lot of money, and that's not something that I want to finance. I don't want to go to nobody's bank. I don't want to go to the bank, and I'm not saying that it won't happen that way. I believe we got enough people following this ministry who are attached to this ministry. We ought to be able to come up with that. You see that? And I ain't gonna pull people for money. I just put it out there what I believe the Lord want us to do and why He want us to do it, and it's up to us whether or not we participate in that. You see that? And so, but I don't believe. I believe we have enough money in the members of this ministry to pay cash for that. You see that? I don't believe we ought to finance it for years.
Amen.
You know, I believe we can have that before this year is up. You know, I believe that we can have that before this year is up. All right. Does anyone have anything they want to say about that?
I'm just excited.
Yeah, I am too. And one thing we're gonna do when we purchase this property, it's got a building on it already. So you know, it wouldn't take us long for us to get that to a place where we can start having church services in it. But again, I'm looking forward to the other things as well, not just having church there, but also being able to minister to people. We've had plenty of people that have wanted to come here from out of town to be ministered to and things like that. So I believe that that's part of the reason why God wants us to get this property, you know, and things like that. To be able to minister to people. Yeah. Like I said, I don't believe, now this is just me, I don't believe the Lord want us to go through a bank to finance it. You see that? So when we purchase this property, we'll keep everybody up to date with how it's going and what all we're doing with it and things like that. I want everybody that's a part of this ministry to start thinking ahead. It's not just going to be, you know, it's not just about you coming here and hearing the word. You see, start thinking about what part you ought to play in it. And think about, to me, the people that are part of this ministry right now, especially the people that are here locally, to me, I look at us like a team, and God has something for us to do. You see that, to help people. And when I say team, I mean, I think it's supposed to be like it was what it was in the Bible. You see, God told us as ministers to make disciples. Well, then what did Jesus' disciples do? They went and made disciples, didn't they? So that's what we ought to do. And so that's why I say I believe that we're a team. You as a disciple of Christ, you have something to offer to the body of Christ, and you need to figure out what that is. You see that? I think about the gift of tongues. Now somebody here is supposed to have it. And I hadn't done it. You see that? These gifts are supposed to be operating. And y'all gonna have to learn to think above just coming and hearing the word. You see that? You got something to offer. Is how many gifts is it? 12, right? Is it 12 gifts? 9 gifts? I think it's 9. All the gifts of the Holy Spirit are supposed to be operating today. The gift of healing, the gift of the miracles, prophesying, speaking in tongues, the interpretation of tongues. All of those are for today, and they're supposed to be operating in the church. Now, God didn't just call you here to be, to sit on a stump. If he called you here, he wants to use you. You see that? We're not going to all be preachers, and we're not going to all sing, but we're supposed to have some kind of gift. And so I want us to be prayerful about that, how, we're all going to function, what God wants us to do, what God wants you as an individual to do, so that when he starts sending more people, you are doing your part and contributing how you're supposed to contribute in the ministry and in ministering to other people. You see that? You had something to say?
I wanted to just comment on what you just said, because that's something that the Lord has started dealing with me this week about, like, being diligent and seeking him and, like, seeking him for my purpose and things like that. And one of the scriptures he brought me to that really, like, I guess, spoke to me was Proverbs chapter 13, verse 4. And it says, the soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. And it just made me, like, realize, like, you could want all day long to serve the Lord and to do what he wants you to do, but if you're not seeking him and you're not being diligent in it, then it's for nothing.
Yes, sir.
Like some of those gifts that you mentioned, I think are fairly evident. However, some not so much. So how would you know if you had some of those? Like if you had a gift of wisdom, how would you even know that?
A lot of these gifts, they operate around each other. Like, for instance, like speaking in tongues. Somebody can have the gift of speaking in tongues without having the gift to interpret it. So ain't nobody interpreting if nobody's speaking in it. You see what I mean? And so what has to happen is, since they all function around each other, people have to start doing that. They have to be open to allow that. And part of that is expecting these things to happen, expecting these things. I'll give you, for instance, the gift of healing. There are times when I call and I ask people for prayer. I'm really pulling for somebody that I know need a healing. But if they're not thinking, they'll miss it, and then other people will miss the testimony of it. You see what I mean? I can't tell you the number of times people have called me or text me about something that's hurting them. And then when I call it out in church and say, if anybody need prayer, come up. Nobody come up. You see. And so we have to, God want to move us into the mindset of expecting. And that's when it becomes evident. When we have faith to see it, we'll see it. When we have faith to expect it. Most of us, what do we, let's think about this. What are we doing? Well, we come here, we may hear Sister Guillory singing. What are we doing? What are we doing? I'm looking for answers. Singing. Is anybody praying? Lord, move. I'm expecting you to move. You see what I mean? And I'm going to tell you, you can't rush the Spirit of God. That's the reason it's 2 o'clock and I ain't trying to rush because I know folks want to get home and cook. You know, I used to have to, the first church I pastored, I had to make that announcement. Now, if anybody, y'all got something to do, we just get up and leave. Don't let your spirit bring down what the Spirit of God want to do. Because I can feel it when folks is in a hurry. You know that. And so, I'm not going to rush because folks got something to do. To me, we ain't switching it up every other week. You know what time we have church. Make plans around it. They sell crock pots you can cook in the night before. See? Don't be, you know. You ought to come here expecting to be here all day. If need be. Don't come here with plans at 2 o'clock, 1:30. You see, I'm just being up front. Stay home. I don't need to wrestle with that spirit you got wanting to rush. You see that? You ain't feeling good? Come up and ask for prayer. You getting sleepy? Stand up and ask for prayer. You see? I'm telling you, you can't rush what God want to do. You know why Moses was so effective? There was a time, you can read it in the Word, he went to inquire of the Lord, and he was on his face for 40 days straight. 40 days straight. You see that? So if there's a spirit of time here, that's why we don't have no clocks in here. If there's a spirit of time and you just got something to do us all a favor and go. And we ain't gonna talk about you when you leave. I just want the Lord to be able to move freely. And he can't move freely with your watch.
Amen.
You see that? I want him to be able to move freely. And so when we come before the Lord, let's pray and ask the Lord to have his way here. There are people that's dealing with some real stuff. And we need to make sure that we have time for that. You know, many of you, you've heard me tell about the dream I had where somebody was bound by something. And I saw the people in this ministry gathered around this person, praying for him. And then, you know, when I laid hands and prayed on them, prayed for them, it jumped on me, whatever that spirit was. And somebody looked and said, oh, it's done got a hold of him. And so then everybody gathered around me and started praying for me. But then I saw, one by one, the people began to say, oh, my show is coming on. Oh, I got to go. I mean, that's what they were literally saying. Oh, I need to go home and cook. And one by one, they left me. And so I went and sat down, and this is what I understood. Number one, people don't have the love that it takes to deliver people and feel like they don't have the time. Number two, now this is what was coming to me. I'm a prisoner trapped inside of my body. And although I'll be able to function in my everyday activities, won't nobody know that I'm still living on the inside of me, trapped as a prisoner. and nobody cares. Now, you may wonder, why was it that the Lord allowed me to be attacked by this spirit? It was so that I could feel what other people feel like when they're bound. Oh yeah, they'll continue to be the housewife. They'll continue to be the husband. But they trapped on the inside of their bodies. You see that? So what the Lord was showing me is time. You see, we dedicated to Him to do His. We're supposed to have enough love to endure with people, to deal with whatever they're struggling with. You see that? That's the reason why. I know there's some people that don't like the question and answers and stuff like that. I understand that. But that's the reason why I take my time and do that, because I know that it's when somebody asks a question, even if it's not for somebody here, somebody out there is listening, and somebody needs to hear the answer to a question that was asked. You see that? I also think, what are we in a hurry to leave here for? What you got to do that's more important? You see? And it ain't that I want to keep people. I don't care. You know, I don't need company. That ain't why we stay here alone, because I'm lonely, you know. But you know why? One of the reasons why I don't go to funerals, you know, is because I do and say everything I got to say before they leave here. If I done missed it, the Lord will let me know. Go talk to that person. Ask them for forgiveness or straighten up whatever it is you got between y'all. So I'm not going to anybody's funeral to pay my respects. I did that when you were living. You see that? So I guess I'm saying I feel like we deal with what we need to deal with now, is what I'm saying. You don't wait until somebody done died and wish that you had dealt with it beforehand. And so I don't want anybody to leave this sanctuary bound, still dealing with the same stuff they were dealing with before. I don't want to be one of these preachers, 45 minutes and you're out, an hour and you're out, because I got somewhere else to go preach across town. We come here, we fellowship to grow and to help one another, to be delivered, to be set free from different things, to be strengthened. That's why we fellowship. And so I don't want us to have a spirit like we just gotta rush. We trying to rush God. I'm not gonna do it. And I feel people tugging on me sometimes, but I ain't like, I don't feel sorry for you, and I don't think of it like it's punishment either. You see, I'm not preaching long to punish you. I was growing up. I grew up and I actually heard a Baptist preacher say that. He turned around, they were visiting our church. You remember that, Jessica? They were visiting our church. And he turned around and told his choir, if y'all don't sing good, I'm going to preach long. And I thought to myself, now I know it ain't God talking. I know that ain't. The Lord will never say nothing like that. If y'all don't sing good, I'm going to preach long. What you going to do, cut the Lord short? So. All right, does anyone else have anything to say, to add to that? Yes, sir.
Does God ever put people in positions where only He can answer their questions?
The person that's in a position,
Yeah.
not necessarily. Like you've heard me say before, I believe we ought to look for God in everything. So there are times that God answers, and because we're looking for Him one way, we'll miss Him, in other ways that He speaks. You see what I mean? So it's not that the minister of God is the only one that answers questions that, concerning what may be on a person's heart. We have to be open to that. Now, what we were preaching about is people having this mindset of shutting the minister out because they feel like they've reached a certain plateau with the Lord, and so now I can hear from God myself. Just saying that will keep you from hearing from God, because it's out of pride. You see what I mean? And so I believe that we are to look for God in everything. So with ministers a lot of times, and not just the one-on-one where you send an email or text or call asking for a particular question, but you may have a question in your heart that nobody even know about. If you come here and you expect God to answer you, He'll answer. You won't even have to ask the question. It'll just be something that He speaks during the message. But if you're not careful, you'll miss it. And then one day you'll be listening to it 2 years down the road, and you'll be thinking, "Whoa, wait a minute." You see? So that's what I mean. If you look for God just in different ways, He'll answer you in different ways. And it don't have to be through His minister. I'm just saying that if you know that there's somebody there that's like that, you expect it that way. You see what I mean? Don't disregard it because of pride. That's what Ahaziah did. He was going to get around Elijah, Does that answer your question? All right. We have anything else anyone want to speak or say? All right. No one else have anything they want to say? We'll remind you all to continue to lift up the Evans family in your prayers. We also want to ask you all to pray about this property that we want to purchase to do more of the Lord's work. And also, if the Lord give you anything about it, anything at all, not just about the vision and the dream that I had, but just anything about it, please email us or text us or call us, whatever. Most of you that watch us online, you have a way to get in touch with us, because we'd like to know what you have to say. Maybe the Lord have laid something on your heart about it, or even if you want to give towards that, we'd appreciate that. But also let us know that that's what you're giving towards as well. And but all the money that people give, of course, it goes towards the work of the Lord. And so, but we don't have a building fund or anything like that. But I'm gonna say I don't believe that we should finance $40,000. I believe that that's something we ought to be able to pay for outright. You see that? All right. That's all now. We'll go ahead and dismiss you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ.